And this is going to be an extremely interesting session because we have three very eminent speakers who are going to speak upon an area which is social engineering, social sciences when it mixes with engineering skills, or on the reverse, when engineering skills become humble enough to help the social sciences. So in that sense, we are using the word social engineering sciences in India. And in this session, to initiate the session, we have a personality whom personally I met almost 3 decades back when I was a young person. I remember that day, I had gone to Sir with some other professors from Jadavpur University, and it was supposed to be a 10 minutes meeting, and then Sir detained us with love and care for almost an hour, and he gave us a lecture on the future of science and technology of India. I still remember that day. This was a time when the Science Museum or the Science City complex had not yet come up. So this is prior to it. So this is long back. So somehow I have the honor and privilege to know Sir from those days. And I think you are all getting about whom I am talking about. A person who has influenced the entire gamut of science museum making in India. A person who has guided and streamlined the organization of institutions of science, like the way we have in the US the Smithsonian Sciences, which is actually an extension from the Rockefeller Foundation, a person who met Swami Vivekananda, and he was changed. And the whole foundation of the Smithsonian museums that we have in the District of Columbia in Washington City. So it's a legacy which has come to India because of Sir. And Sir has a huge background which cannot be read in 10 minutes. But I think I should just mention a few things. And it is so incidental that the same institution where I used to visit as a student, Sir was a director of that. So because in those days, almost 40 years back, we used to have the science quizzes and the science debates at the Birla Industrial and Technological Museum, which is one of the prime institutions of Kolkata. And I don't know how many of you have actually gone there and seen each and every exposition of the museum, but much of that was actually organized by Sir itself. And Sir was also the Director General of the National Council of Science Museums. And I think there's a lot of think, and an award of Padma Shri followed by an award of Padma Bhushan in science and technology by the President of India is, I think, just not an equivalent to what Sir is. So we are talking about Professor Dr. Saroj Ghosh. I think a big hand to Sir. And I'll request Molly to kindly come here. Sir. Molly, kindly grace.
Good, great books. Thank you very much. Now we are down to earth, material science or technology. Science, technology and engineering are commonly uttered in the same breath, implying an umbilical cord amongst them. In an epoch when S&T calls forth the excitement of extraterrestrial space odyssey, single-click communication with the concept of a global village, genetic engineering with not too distant possibility of creating life in the laboratory, questions rightly arise on the definition, function and interrelationship of these three disciplines. On the face of it, the term technology or engineering seems ambiguous in the complicity, in the multiplicity of meanings and associations it invokes. Is it an offspring of the generalized concept of science, or its twin brother with a give and take relationship? What motivates technological innovation? The imagination of a paradigm changer great man, or social determinism, or economic motive, or a mixture of the two or three? How did Western technology diffuse and take its root in countries like India or China, having strong pre-existing indigenous culture base? And particularly, how technology and engineering in India served the civil society, giving rise to the concept of social engineering. Just now, I heard some passing remark. Social engineering, if you go to the internet these days, they do not mean what we are going to mean today here. Social engineering is the manipulation of mind for probably breaking into the security code of the people, which probably leads to some kind of crime. So we are not going to that kind of social engineering today. In the mid-19th century, the discipline of engineering was split into two: civil engineering and military engineering, depending on the end use and not on the subject, like mechanical engineering, electrical and metallurgy, like that. At that time, civil engineering was not restricted to buildings, roads and bridges, but embraced all areas beneficial to the civil society at large. That was the time when the large volume of emerging electrical engineering was reported in the proceedings of the Institution of Civil Engineers in London. The concept of social engineering may have commenced between 4000 and 2000 BC in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley civilization, when humans started to abandon a nomadic existence, creating a need for living in a society. Like in other countries, technology and engineering developed in India in autonomous manner, more or less independent of science, during the ancient and medieval period. For the purpose of this presentation, we shall exclude development in science in the areas of ancient cosmology, mathematics, physical and natural science, etc., and restrict our attention to technology or engineering relating to town planning, water management, metallurgy, medieval technology, chemical technology, textile, luxury goods, shipping industry, and touch upon post-industrial developments. The first thing that we would like to mention here, just passing remarks, because these things are all known. This is not the primary things that I am going to present before you. I would rather concentrate on the various motive forces that were responsible here in India for development of technology through the ages. But quickly we can pass through that one. First area was urban settlement, and when I say Harappan civilization, it includes pre-Harappan also. Harappan sites reveal planned settlement, private and public buildings, aligned roads with drainage, public bath toilets, storage facilities, irrigation system, flood control measures, and burned bricks. That's very, very important. In Lothal Dockyard, we find evidences of the accurate weights and measures and scale, coins of different empire, showing brisk trade with India, outside, between India and the outside world. This is something well known. I would point out one thing here. When we talk about metals in civilization, excavation in Harappan sites reveal kilns for smelting copper ingots and tools of different kinds, pierced needles, circular saws, twisted drills. And the picture that you are seeing here, the small bronze dancer, technologically this is a very important artifact because it is believed that this is probably the first sample of lost wax casting process. The bronze was cast in Shirapadu, or what is known as lost wax process. Then we have to remember archaeological finds from Atranji Kheda and other places, which takes the date of iron technology, ferrous technology, back to, some people claim, 11th century BC. Earlier it was thought that probably we have evidences of ferrous technology up to 6th century BC. In metals in civilization, the thing that is cited most is that 5th century rust-free iron pillar made of wrought iron with a small proportion of manganese, which is in the Qutub site, and massive iron beams in the temples of Puri and Konarak. They are cited as marvels. Now, what is little known that this technology is still prevalent, is still pursued by the tribal community in Koraput. Even now, some 20 years ago, we sent a team over there to recreate the furnace that they are using in Koraput, the picture of which is shown below. That was done for our international exhibition on Indian technology in ancient period. One important thing is that for building up these massive temples and monuments, the kind of technological, the kind of tools that was used over there, the tools, the material handling devices, contrivances, and so, this one was also heavily dependent on technology. I would mention one specific thing is zinc smelting. The zinc furnace excavated in Zawar in Rajasthan, they were dated by teams coming from London, and they were dated belonging to, well, closely to 12th century AD. Whereas the first patent for zinc smelting was filed by William Champion in 18th century. And why it was important? Because the zinc had a typical problem. The melting point of zinc, melting point for coming down from solid state to liquid state, and the temperature at which the liquid zinc evaporates, the difference between these temperatures is very small, relatively small compared to other materials. So the problem is that whenever zinc would be smelt in a furnace, and very quickly from zinc ore, the solid zinc will melt into liquid form, and very quickly it would have a tendency to evaporate and get lost in air unless there is a very careful arrangement for temperature control in the furnace. And this kind of temperature control was achieved there in Zawar, in other places also. Then we know about the Damascene swords, the high quality of steel, and so on. We would remember the medical technology. For this medical technology, Sushruta Samhita, fully describes development of a series of precision metal tools based on the jaws and beaks of animals and birds for performing surgery of different kinds, including excision, incision, puncturing, probing, organ extraction, fluid drainage, bloodletting, suturing, and cauterization. The caesarean section was known. Fracture management and bone setting reached a high degree of skill, and rhinoplasty or plastic surgery was developed far beyond anything known elsewhere at that time. Extraction of medicine then afterwards, from vegetation, rocks and minerals and animal products, and use of medicine for cure of disease as reflected in Charak Samhita and subsequent Ayurvedic text or preceding Ayurvedic texts both led to developments in chemistry and chemical technology. When we talk about chemical technology, paints were made from natural raw materials for rock paintings in Ajanta and Ellora, which are lasting for 1500 years. Color first dyes were developed for textiles in a similar manner. The manufacture of alkaline substances, food preservatives, medicinal powders, ointments and liquids was systematized, as was technology relating to food processing. Traditional technology for manufacturing perfumes like Mittika Attar is still in practice in Kanauj. The picture shows the distillation process. Today it is done. Mittika Attar is prepared in Kanauj, and we really duplicated this process for our international exhibition and produced this Mittika Attar, which was very popular, particularly in Europe and America. One thing is very important, you see those distillation tubes which are used, still they are used with bamboos, not glass or any metal tube over there. The bamboos are used as their distillation tubes. Water management. Social needs arising out of the intense heat in a tropical country provided impetus for technological innovations in water management techniques, irrigation canals, wells of different types, including the stepped well, Bauli, which you find in Delhi in old archaeological sites even today. Storage tanks and variety of water harvesting techniques were developed throughout the subcontinent. The reservoirs at Girnar in Kathiawar, the top picture, the artificial lake of Bhojpur near Bhopal, artificial lake fed by the Kaveri river with stone sluices and irrigation channels, and artificial lakes built throughout the desert state of Rajasthan by Rajput kings for irrigation are some of the important projects built in ancient and medieval India. For prediction of monsoon for harvesting, giant masonry observatories were built in Delhi, Jaipur, Mathura, Ujjain and Varanasi at a later stage. Now, let us leave aside the things which were done over there. There are many, many more examples over there. I skipped this one. I would now like to mention some of the things which are important for us to remember. One is that for various technological projects, state patronization was an important boon, I would say. Pre-colonial India witnessed state patronization in technology promotion in several areas, two of which deserve special attention. There are many. I would mention two. First, artillery production was actively encouraged with financial support from the Mughal and Rajput rulers for military purpose. That was not social engineering, but it's very important because of the massive state patronization. Abdur Rahman chronicled the development of heavy guns in the world, heaviest guns in the world in India during the 16th century. The Jayagarh cannon factory was one of India's best, and the Jaipur Rajputs laid claim to owning Asia's largest cannons. During Emperor Akbar's time, Fatullah Siraji developed a giant cannon cleaner. The picture that you are seeing today, we recreated this giant cannon cleaner for our international exhibition. Here you see how with the gear system, now there are 8 radial arms, 2 cannon barrels are mounted on each radial arm, so 16 cannon barrels could be cleaned very quickly, and this whole thing was run by a bull. It was powered by a bull, which was like this Kolur Ghani. The bull used to move like that and turn that central pole, and with the gearing system that the brushes were moving, rotating inside the barrels of the cannons. The second area concerning the social engineering was production of luxury goods. Investments were also made for the manufacture of high quality luxury goods that found favor in the courts, such as the textiles, carpets, lamps, glassware, decorated metalware, marble, jewelry, etc. Specialized manufacturing towns were promoted throughout the country, and not only for home consumption but for export outside. And that was important, the export, which really encouraged the shipbuilding in the country. A major limitation of the Indian manufacturing system in pre-industrial era was that much of the process was highly labor intensive and slow, though the quality of production was exceptional. Highly skilled artisans trained down the generation in a technological caste-based society were available in plenty, but adequate capital was not forthcoming for improvement of machineries to increase the productivity and make the production less labor intensive. However, in certain areas where demand growth was high, successful attempts were made for improvising the machineries to meet the market challenge. Textile industry is one of such areas where continuous improvisation took place. India's manually operated textile machines were considered the best in the world, and the textile products commanded the world market at one time. The huge demand for Indian exports gave a boost to Indian shipping. I would mention shipping specifically. There are many things to mention, but in this short time, would mention shipping specifically because to me it appeared that during the pre-industrial era, Indian shipping industry was technologically very much advanced. In pre-industrial time, Atlantic ships that followed the Portuguese in Indian waters are believed to have been superior to Indian ships for the use of iron nails, iron anchors, hempen ropes, palms, and the use of new navigational instruments like telescope, compass, and globe. The Indian shipbuilders were, however, quick to make design changes. Earlier I mentioned yesterday that India did not use the iron nails but used the riveting system of putting the planks together so fast and make it absolutely watertight. And instead of hempen ropes, they used coir ropes. Now the coir ropes and the durable timber used for shipbuilding, they were available plenty in this country at a much, much lower price. That's why Indian ships were developed. I mean, shipbuilding was done in a very profitable manner. The Indian shipbuilders were, however, quick to make design changes calculated to produce better fighting ships by including the cannons. Earlier, the Indian ships were for trade and commerce, not for fighting. But then they adopted this one by copying the hull shapes of the Iberian carracks and galleons with rows of heavy guns on either side. From the 16th century, they started using iron nails, particularly in large vessels of 600 tons or more, intended for longer voyages. By the mid-17th century, Indians were purchasing iron anchors from the Europeans, and by the end of the century began the indigenous manufacturing of iron anchors. India's richness in timber and cottage was matched by the ingenuity of its shipbuilders and artificers. Now comes the golden age of shipbuilding in India. In 1735, the East India Company appointed Lauji Nasirwanji Wadia of Surat as their master builder at the Bombay dockyard. Wadia, followed by his two sons Manekji and Bomanji, built more than 50 ships of 200 tons weight or more. In the early 19th century, Jamsetji Bomanji and then his son Nauroji built ships of more than 2,000 tons with 84 guns for East India Company Navy. Total tonnage of company ships in India rose from 79,000 tons to 110,000 tons from 1792 to 1811. I mentioned this yesterday about the ship which is believed to be used by the British Navy, and then on board of this ship in 1812, the ship made by Wadia, on board of this ship in 1812, the national anthem of United States, Star Spangled Banner, was composed and sung for the first time. Now I would come to one important point. By this time, I'm talking to that 1812, 1811, 1812 time. By this time, Indian shipping industry posed a serious threat to the British shipping industry. So much that in 1815, the British Parliament had to pass a registry act stipulating that a 15% duty would be imposed on goods imported in India-built ships. Then, only British ships should import goods from south and east of Cape of Good Hope. Then, any ship which would not have on board 3/4 of its crew of British mariners, or 7 British mariners per 100 registered tons, would be liable to forfeiture, and no ship would enter the port of London whose master was not a British mariner. And besides, Indian sailors shall not be deemed British mariners. This indicates really how much terror the Indian ships created in the East Indian Navy to the British shipbuilding yards. No wonder that Gandhiji wrote in a place, Indian shipping has to perish so that British shipping must flourish. For the post-industrial development, steam navigation, railways, telegraph, irrigation system, manufacturing industries, engineering developments in these areas in the second half of the 19th century and subsequent period are well chronicled in contemporary historical accounts and do not require narrative statement today. For this brief presentation, it may however be useful to have a look at various motive forces behind these developments. What were the motive forces for this post-industrial development? The first thing I would like to mention is trade and commerce. The second quarter of the 19th century witnessed a rapid increase in commercial activities in India. I refrain from mentioning what are the areas and how much really the trade and commerce increased. Well, it's all recorded, but there was enormous increase in trade and commerce suddenly. During 1839 to 49, some 30,000 miles of road was constructed, but transportation costs remained high as long as bullock carts were the main medium of transport. To overcome this disadvantage, the business community started campaigning for introducing to India two principal achievements of the Industrial Revolution: steamships and steam locomotion. Next one is the political forces. With commercial needs for better transport and communication facilities, the advent of the railways and electric telegraph in India was only a matter of time when political forces suddenly expedited the whole course of action. After two successive Anglo-Sikh wars, the whole of Punjab was annexed to the company's territory in March 1849. Consequently, the entire northeast frontier area, which had formerly been a part of Afghanistan and which came under the Sikhs in 1839, became a part of the company's territory in India. A close vigil was necessary to thwart any possible aggression by the Afghans and the frontier tribes with whom conflict started in 1849, resulting in successive expeditions to the area. These events increased the strategic importance of Peshawar and produced the need for a rapid communication link between the area and Calcutta, the headquarters of the supreme government. Now came at that time, at that juncture of history, Lord Dalhousie as the Governor General of India. Dalhousie happened to be the most ambitious of all Governors General in territorial annexations. Within a few months after his landing at Calcutta, the Second Sikh War began and ended with the total annexation of Punjab up to the Khyber Pass. He captured Angul, Satara, Sambalpur, Darjeeling in quick succession and planned for the annexation of many other native states under the controversial doctrine of lapse. In the course of these extensive military activities, Dalhousie felt the need for a close coordination between the army units in provincial headquarters and his headquarters, which was located at Calcutta at the farthest corner of the country and more than 1600 miles away from the northwest frontier. Indigenous culture. Economic and political considerations are not the only moving forces behind new technological ventures. Scientific and technological culture internal to the society also came into force. It is significant that a scientific community of some depth and complexity had developed around Calcutta and other parts of the subcontinent in the pre-industrial area. In the 18th century, English missionaries and physicians had assumed the task of investigating Indian natural history and acquiring extensive collections of flora and fauna. The Asiatic Society of Bengal was founded in 1784 and the Botanic Garden was set up at Calcutta in 1787. New scientific journals appeared in 1830s with details of experiments, observations and inference of local scientists and physicians. The gleanings of science merged with the Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1832. The Quarterly Journal of the Calcutta Medical and Physical Society yielded to circular selections in 1838 to 40. The aforesaid society published transactions during 1823 to 49, and the new government meant Kashipur Gun Factory, Jessup and Company and other private workshops had the capability of undertaking large and complex jobs. In these factories, the wooden hulls of steam vessels were built and steam engines were repaired. The steam engines and vessels which were required on the Ganges, steamboats on the Ganges going from Calcutta to up to Allahabad at that time. When a ship carrying railway carriages from England sank at the Sandheads in 1853, that was the time all the carriages sank over there. And that was the time there was no telephone, no telegraph and no aeroplane. So the message had to go really by ship to London, order to be placed for new carriages to be built and then brought by ship to Calcutta, which the whole process would take minimum of 6 months. Dalhousie was very keen to return to England very quickly because of his some medical problems, and Dalhousie said, I don't want to hear anything of that one. I must have the railway introduced in India. I mean, this is what I'm talking about, Calcutta, introduced in Calcutta on schedule. It must be done. I don't know how this would be done. So this was done. All carriages were built at Calcutta for the first train which ran between Calcutta and Hooghly in 1854. They were built in Jessup factory. The next item that I would like to mention is about the local artisans. The skill of local artisans is also an important consideration in any new enterprise. Henry Bernstein observes that, quote, the Ganges Valley villages were teeming with men whose skills in their own traditional technology were roughly similar to those needed to keep a steam flotilla in service. The Bengal Steam Department engaged a large number of carpenters and smiths who worked admirably well. The high performance of local artisans in the mint was cited in a railway report urging the employment of native mechanics in railways instead of bringing labor from England at a much higher cost. We would be talking to a little bit of caste system in this connection. The Hindu artisans came from traditional castes of blacksmith, brazier, carpenter, potter, weaver, leather worker, etc. The names are like that, Tantuvai, Sutradhar, Karmakar, Swarnakar, Kumbhakar, Malakar, and so on. Each artisan acquired a certain amount of craft skill and unconsciously imbibed much of the related technical skill through generations and from his own atmosphere. Some scholars have identified the rigid caste system as a major social impediment that retarded the technological progress in India. They thought that this made the society so close to resist inflow of technology from outside. But in disagreement, Toynbee emphasized the essential continuity of the Indian cultural heritage and pointed out that Hinduism was not necessarily concomitant with rigid caste systems as witnessed in its transfer to Indonesia and Southeast Asia. On one hand, caste has been seen as a disincentive. On the other hand, it promoted trade specialization, skill maintenance, and conventions of production. A little bit about public reaction. What was the attitude of the local populace towards the new technological enterprises? Contemporary European writers in general contended that the local Indian population in the middle of the 19th century was not receptive to Western technology. George Dodd noticed, quote, bewilderment of the Hindu mind at such achievements, unquote. And Key and Mallison observed, quote, the prodigious triumphs over time and space achieved by these fire carriages, means locomotives, and lightning posts, means electric telegraph, put to shame the wisdom of the Brahmins, and it was alarming and offensive to the Brahminical mind. There are many more quotes, I'm leaving that aside. It may be quite true that the people in India were bewildered at the conquest of space and time by the railways and telegraph. But records show that the people in Europe and America were also bewildered at the amazing performance of the telegraph. There are plenty of instances which can be cited, but bewilderment does not necessarily generate antipathy. Contemporary writers have recorded how the native people of all classes were eager to undertake journeys by steamboats and railways in early days. Particularly, I would like to mention Kali Krishna Sinha's Hutam Pechan Naksha about that beautiful piece on the eagerness of the people to ride the railway. Connected to that one, the first report of the Telegraph Department done by O'Shaughnessy shows that in the first year of operation, Indians sent more than 1/3 of the messages not only for transacting financial business but also for family arrangements, betrothals, marriages, and other domestic affairs. Little bit about government stimulations. Local stimulation played an important role in development of both science and technology during the middle of 19th century. Lord Auckland, the then Governor General, initiated at the Government House a series of weekly parties called by the newspapers Auckland Soiree, to which gentlemen of scientific pursuits and attainments, underquote, were invited with a view to bring forward interesting discoveries in general science. This unprecedented gesture was hailed with loud optimism about the future of science and technology in India by newspapers both in India and England. The Governor General was a major contributor to the fund raised by William O'Shaughnessy for making his 1,000-cell battery a very important technological achievement at that time. A little bit about technical education. A very important point of consideration in the role of colonialism in technology transfer in the subcontinent is that education, both general and technical, was not encouraged by the colonizers to support Indian technological system. During the period 1871 to 82, out of 3,000 Indian college graduates, only 53 graduated in engineering. 2/3 of this lot entered some forms of government employment rather than joining private industries or agriculture. Students interested only in so-called white-collar jobs studied general commerce, plant acclimatization, and natural history. Colonial government policy was not in favor of creating institutions which could provide a large cadre of engineers and skilled workers for service in industrial or technological projects. Between 1855 and 1880s, daily employment in the railway sector might have varied from around 250,000 to 500,000. In spite of this employment situation, the government policy was against creation of educational institutions to cater to the need of the time, engineering institutions. Apart from the policy of apathy towards technical education, the colonial relationship factors, as indicated by Inkster, can be analyzed through studies in several technology sectors. Indigenous silk and cotton techniques were in many cases ousted by British techniques or imports, and India lost the world market it commanded in earlier centuries. Synthetic dye produced in England in 1856 virtually killed the indigo plantation in the subcontinent. The Bengal Iron Company, founded in 1875, suffered an immediate setback from improved methods of British pig iron production, bringing down the price of the imported pig to 50% of the former level. Even in the cases where imported techniques were complementary to indigenous technologies, key information was often held back. There are plenty of instances for that. And I would end with certain observations on technology transfer, post-industrial technology transfer from Europe, particularly from England to India. The experiences in the subcontinent relating to technology transfer in industrial era in two major projects, railway and telegraph, were of opposing nature. In 1849, when India's first guaranteed railway contracts were signed, the global railway network amounted to scarcely 23,000 miles, 61% of which lay in Europe and 39% in North America. Railway technology was still in a formative stage. Equipment such as fish plates and steel tires were still not introduced, and optimal gauge width was undecided. Railways were introduced in the subcontinent under political and commercial pressure. In view of the urgency, the colonial administration was not willing to take any risk with experimentation on equipment and construction methods. This resulted in adopting British core standards rather rigidly, and India served as a laboratory for the fledgling railway industry in Britain. The situation was rather different in the case of electrical telegraph. The first experimental line was set up in Calcutta in 1839, and the same decade that is marked by the pioneer experiments of Henry, Schilling, Morse, Cook and Wheatstone and Steinheil. The operational telegraph line was constructed in 1851 between Calcutta and Diamond Harbour, shortly after the long commercial lines were built in Europe and America in the late 1840s. Within next 10 years, a fairly large network of 11,000 miles was constructed in India, embracing the length and breadth of a vast country under trying circumstances, including major reconstruction after massive devastation during the Indian Mutiny in 1857-58. This was virtually an one-man activity, for which all credit is attributed to William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, who was simultaneously a creative experimental scientist, an ingenious technological innovator, an enthusiastic entrepreneur, and able administrator. And he had a very, very able deputy always working with him, Shipchandra Nandi. O'Shaughnessy wanted to leave behind a legacy of a grand technological enterprise, and his thought and action were guided by a strong feeling of cultural supremacy, a feeling that was to a great extent responsible for the expansion of imperialism in the colonies. The new technology was construed as a symbol of culture, dignity and power, and O'Shaughnessy felt proud that he had been instrumental in its development in India. This feeling is evident in the concluding lines of his last annual report to the government before his departure from India. I quote, "In my extended tours over all parts of India, I have seldom met a family who had not some anecdote to tell of the services that the telegraph had done them. There are few Europeans in India who have not experienced a thrill of pleasure when they meet our masts and weirs on the margin of every road and know that these true tokens of science and civilization and power traverse our Indian empire to the uttermost limits." Unquote. The force of imperialism behind technology transfer was a double-edged sword. On the one side, a strong feeling of cultural supremacy brought a promise of social progress and justice to the colony. And on the other side, the urge to protect the economic interest at home stalled the establishment of an independent technology culture on the soil in India. A boon and an impediment. That was the destiny of technology transfer to the subcontinent. Thank you.
This is a brilliant lecture, and it's a living museum by itself. And I wish one day, with Sir's blessing and guidance, we are able to make a living laboratory. Sir, if you kindly take this seat. I was just watching one quick thing. Between 1865 to 1880, the railway expansion in India, and a similar thing was happening in the United States towards the Ohio Valley, from Boston and from New Amsterdam, which became New York later. There's a similar thing. But there's a vast difference because the Americans took over the British supremacy in the US. But here, as Sir said, we are under the forces of hedonistic imperialism, one-track imperialism. And it came out so well in the works of Nirmal Bose, who said Calcutta a premature metropolis because it could not become a Sheffield or a Liverpool or a Manchester because it was working with the Industrial Revolution but not drawing the fruits, but only drawing the fruits of imperialism. So that is the difference. And it came out so brilliantly in Sir's exposition. I think this is a living museum. Thank you so much. I think we'll take the questions just before we break for lunch, but we are going to have two quick presentations from two of the illustrious professors from IIT Kharagpur, who just not Sandhi, but from beyond Sandhi, they have been contributing to social sciences in a very deep way. First is Professor Sarita Chopra Chatterjee. I'll invite Madam to kindly come on stage and take over and pick the gauntlet and go ahead. Madam has been single-handedly, sometimes alone, sometimes with a team, working under various domains and genres of social sciences. And yesterday there was a question from the learned audience that how much of these projects are actually grounded with the common man and women in the society. So I think to that question, Professor Sarita Chopra Chatterjee from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, doing so many projects and guiding so many people, is an answer, where Madam's work is extremely grounded with the common man, with hospices, with health care, with medical care, but all concerned about age, all concerned with geriatrics, all concerned with palliative care, and all concerned with the future of elderly population in today's society, which is becoming so fast, so elusive, and so inwardly. So it's over to Madam.
Thank you, Joy, for those kind words. My namaskar, my pranam, Maharaj, to all of you, in fact, in the audience. I'm going to speak on the role of spiritual organizations in end-of-life care. Now, the reflections are part of a project, a larger initiative, Sandhi initiative, in which many others are involved, like Professor Patnaik, Professor Naik, and others. But the reflections on spiritual organizations today, they are my own personal reflections, and I bear full responsibility for any mistakes that I commit, right? Okay. Now, I humbly request all of you to receive the ideas in the light of, some changes which need to be made in spiritual organizations, especially organizations which run affiliated hospitals and old age homes. Now, some of the ideas that I present may not be palatable to the audience. I'm aware of that, but I very humbly appeal to you to have patience and hear me out. I also, before I start, I give my salutations to Swami Vivekananda, who gives, my Guru Swami Vivekananda, who gives me the courage, immense courage to speak out the way I want to through the lens of Sandhi, although the lens itself might be tainted. Okay. Now, I give you a short background of the project to appreciate what I have in mind today. This project, which is the larger Sandhi initiative, is titled Improving End-of-Life Care of the Elderly through Indic Perspectives. Now, we have the propelling force for this project was actually a Leon Foundation report which came out in 2010, and this report listed India as one of the 39th country among 40 countries, member states, which participated in terms of the quality of dying. In fact, it said that we have a very poor quality of dying as measured by 4 indices. Now, I'm not going to discuss these details, but a subsequent report in 2015 made us feel that we have improved in our quality of dying, because some indices by this time, the government had looked into some of the factors which were missing as far as elder care is concerned. So what we started doing in this project is we tried to take a peep into different settings where elderly are dying. The most important setting to begin with was obviously the hospital. And we found that hospitals weren't really good places for dying, not hospitals in India, because they are geared for acute care, not for chronic symptoms which elderly die from. We also found that, there are certain problems with hospital design, architecture, and most important of all, problems with the way physicians take a decision. Like, what do I mean by that? I mean that, physicians are not equipped to actually withdraw treatment even in case of very frail elderly people, and that they subject them to very aggressive treatment in ICUs. Now, this is which did not appeal to me, and we probed further through very small ethnographic surveys on how decisions are made, and we found that, the Indian medico-legal protocol doesn't allow, for instance, DNR, do not resuscitate orders, or non-use of CPR, and also we do not have something which Western countries have done fairly well with, care pathways. When people are dying from very prolonged or experiencing prolonged suffering, they often withdraw them from acute care and switch them on to certain care pathways. Now, admittedly, these care pathways in the Western countries have not done very well. There are problems, and I am aware of them. One of them is the Liverpool care pathway. By the way, these observations are being made by Sarita Chopra Chatterjee, who is not a medical professional. I am a medical sociologist, so you might like to take these observations with a pinch of salt, but I think we are proceeding fairly well, since a book is going to come through Routledge soon. by November. So, going back to the point that I was making, Western countries have done something more serious in end-of-life care by way of having advanced directives where elderly people or anyone else can actually make their wills and preferences known. You know, whether you want an aggressive treatment or you want a very a withdrawal from ICU and aggressive treatment. Now, this is the background. We also followed our study in different other settings like family homes. To our great surprise, we found that family homes could be very, very abusive too for elderly, very abusive. And we started questioning the rhetoric of dying at old in family homes, you know. So the very rhetoric of home care as being very good for the elderly, this was questioned by us. Now, another significant finding is related to the fact that many Western countries have done very well with palliative care. Now, in Eastern India, palliative care is very poorly developed. For those of you who may not know what palliation is, well, it is just symptomatic care trying to improve the quality of a person as long one is living, not through aggressive technologies, but with just symptomatic care, and spirituality is a very important component of palliative care. The important feature of palliation is that it treats the entire person as a whole. It's a holistic treatment rather than just being medically guided. So we looked into other settings like, for instance, streets, old age homes, and the situation was very, very dismal. So this is all about the background to whatever I am trying to say, and I will sum it up in less than 10 minutes. But the outcome of these preliminary, I call them still preliminary surveys because they are very time-taking. Ethical consent from hospitals is very difficult to get. We somehow felt that there was a pain in our heart, you know, that is this the way we are going to die, all of us? In hospitals, entangled in tubes and machines. Well, were we not a country which gave to the world the art of dying? We were one of those civilizations which had a death accepting culture, not a death negating culture. So are we going to die like that under medical gaze, entangled in tubes and machines? This is what actually actually forms the basis, the background of my today's presentation. This is what our masters had to say about death and dying. Quickly, we have Swamiji here, we have Ramakrishna, Shri Ramakrishna, Aurobindo, and Ramana Maharshi. Now, about Ramana Maharshi, he almost witnessed his body decay, but he was immune to pain and suffering. He was immune. He was a yogi of a very high order. Of course, so was Aurobindo, so was Vivekananda and other masters. Ramana Maharshi, that's what he said. Let the body decay. Body is not of much concern to me. Okay, and that probably, I will not go into the details. So what I am trying to say, that dying is an art among Hindus, and like all art forms, only a few can appreciate it in modern times. The spiritual masters make grand exits. What are the exits like? We'll discuss them later, but there was a fourfold philosophy that the death of the body is certain. Subtle dimensions of the body do not die. Eternal self is birthless and deathless, and one who realizes the eternal self will not be reborn again. Summarily, this is what has been told by them. So the grand exits that I am speaking of, it involved voluntary relinquishment of the body, conscious dying, conscious, shaggana mrityu, conscious dying, right? Not that you are sedated under a terminal sedation, no, conscious dying. And there is a predetermination of the time and manner of dying. Remember Swamiji saying that when he is going to die, he is not going to live beyond 40 years. Saying no to medical treatment, saying no to medical treatment. What sort of a medical treatment? Yes, aggressive medical treatment, the sort of treatment that we are likely to endure in ICUs. So, just this slide has just been inserted to facilitate your understanding. Spiritual care figures importantly in Western countries, and spirituality figures importantly in national guidelines for quality palliative care. Just let me tell the audience that palliative care has not made much headway in India, although recently a bill has been passed. Okay, so new advances have also been made in transdisciplinary health care, and healthcare systems, as per WHO's recommendations, they are moving towards biopsychosocial and spiritual care. Now, coming to the Indian situation, we find that spirituality has no place in medical care, mainstream care, and there is complete disengagement of medicine from spirituality. One of the reasons for this is palliative care is dissociated from mainstream medical care, medical knowledge making. So, and wherever palliation is introduced, mostly in the field of oncology research, it is highly cancer specific, you find it is clinical in nature. There are very few palliative experts who look into the spiritual needs and preferences of the dying elderly or any person, whosoever it be. So, based on my students' ethnography, I find that multidisciplinary ethos itself is lacking, and spiritual care is not part of doctor and nurses' training. As a result, doctors don't know how to assess the spiritual needs of the dying. Okay, and sharp contradictions in recent times have emerged, and we have seen these contradictions emerge in the case of Santhara in 2011 as Kaila Devi in Rajasthan, when she committed Santhara. The public interest litigation was filed saying that, well, it is violative of human rights. So there are these very sharp contradictions and clashes between religious and spiritual and secular concerns in end-of-life care. So serious problematics emerge for spiritual organizations managing hospitals and old age homes. Many masters, here I think some ideas may not be palatable to the audience, please bear with me. Many masters are aging and dying in hospitals. Not all reach transcendental heights of the foundational masters, obviously. Obviously, not everyone could be Swami Vivekananda, right? Many, in fact, die in a manner which is in stark contrast to the core philosophy of the organization itself, right? I mean, they are not able to detach themselves from the body. It's not very easy, Maharaj himself might vouch for that, right? Treatment care plans in hospitals may throw ethical dilemmas in beneficence. Time is running short. I will not go into the details, but may result in aggressive treatments, a point we have mentioned, and images of such dying So images of such dying may not reinforce or support public commitment to the organization's philosophy. Now, so what are the key questions in the treatment plan? Russia, we will complete it in 5 minutes. Are we able to intervene in providing a state of mind conducive to spiritual progress? Have we evolved a terminal event planning for those who have been practicing sadhana for years together? Practicing detachment from the body, but getting hooked on to machines at the end of the life. Are we able to facilitate new meanings of life or mortality, and are we able to help them to adapt to suffering? Now the question is, this is very important for spiritually affiliated hospitals. Do hospitals, such hospitals, even like the RKM the hospital, do hospitals need exemption from existing medico-legal protocols which are creating problems for good end-of-life care? Do they need exemption? Can they go ahead with the CPR? Can they go ahead with the DNR guidelines? Can they abide by the wishes of the dying masters, right, to withdraw technologies? That's my question. Okay, then other important changes: treatment limiting decisions to support voluntary relinquishment of life, so valued in Indian philosophy. You know, euthanasia is not acceptable to the Indian Constitution. But can we exempt our hospitals from this? Okay, withdrawal of terminal sedation or use of sense-deadening drugs to facilitate conscious dying, if I want to die that way, because I have been practicing it as part of my sadhana for years. Okay, better and clear prognosis of death to facilitate conscious dying, and also use of multiple therapeutic modalities in end-of-life care. Multiple therapeutic modalities, by that I mean, for instance, many of our masters had preference for Ayurveda rather than allopathic medicines or homeopathy. So can we, in mainstream medical treatment organizations like the ones run by RKM also, can we encourage multiple therapeutic modalities, and are our doctors trained in encouraging or using these multiple therapeutic modalities? That's the big question. And do we need hospices attached to hospitals to facilitate less aggressive treatment? Hospices are dedicated spaces for dying, right? And they are also places which can encourage spiritual care for the dying patient. So do we actually make it mandatory for such organizations to have hospices attached to them? Okay, now this is partly based on 2 more minutes. This is partly based on my very short visit with my student to an old age home. Now, this is a women's old age home, and entry is denied to the researchers. There is the ambience, eerie silence. My student peeps into the old age home and says to me, "Ma'am, it looks like a prison." Yes, the caregiver doesn't allow us an entry into the old age home, but she says that death in Varanasi doesn't come early. It doesn't come fast. It's not speedy. Long years of suffering. That means people are dying for years, dying slowly, aging and dying for years in old age homes of Varanasi. So what do they do when they die, when they age and die so slowly, such a slow death? Well, she says that, the monk says that they are, hopefully they are all spiritually evolved to have passed such sanskaras to their spiritually tuned children. Many of them are parents of the monks who are staying there. So it is assumed that they have the spiritual sanskaras and they can spend their entire day with those spiritual values, japa and mantra. So I say, the whole day? Well, do they lose their mental balance in the process? The monk says, yes, sometimes they do. They become psychiatric patients. But we don't have a psychiatrist here. What do you do, sir? Well, we tell them to sit for the evening prayers. Okay. Now they are not engaged in any other activity. Previously they were, but now they are not engaged in any activity. So the guest rooms that we stayed were pretty dirty. The question that came to my mind was, what if these women were allowed to participate in the management of the old age home in Varanasi? Now, what if I am in this home out of compulsion because I don't have children? How would aging and dying look or appear to me? Would I like to be a mere recipient of charity? Is this not an affront to my dignity? Granted the fact that my sadhana has taught me to negate the ego, still, would I like to be on charity like that? Do I have nothing else to contribute? And, well, have we understood the different meanings of spirituality for different people? Spirituality doesn't carry one single meaning. It has multiple meanings. So, and now this slide, well, I'm not going to read out this slide, but all of us know. Please go through it. Where Swamiji is put on aggressive treatment and is dying slowly, our 97-year-old monk from Ramakrishna Mission. The much revered Swamiji. Okay. In contrast to this, we have this grand vision and image of someone who dies meditating. In contrast to this, we have the grand exit of Aurobindo, Shri Aurobindo. And finally, my question to this August gathering is, are spiritual organizations homogenizing meanings of spirituality, life and death? As I said, spirituality has various meanings for various people, right? But are they homogenizing the meanings? Are they able to accommodate plurality of meanings? Are they helping to evolve a culture-sensitive model of care for the aged and dying? Throughout the world, globally, there is a need, felt need for culture-sensitive models. Evolve culture-sensitive models. Are they helping to evolve this culture-sensitive model? And are they able to contribute to the goal of end-of-life care as a public health agenda? I have already taken a long time. I think Joy is getting impatient with me. Thank you very much for listening patiently.
I'm just wondering what's going to happen to me in the lack of children, But there is no deficit of children in this world because I have so many beautiful students around me and they're all my children. So actually there is no problem. The solution is there in the mind, the problem is there in the mind. The choice is yours. And this was a brilliant presentation by Sarita Di, who does not work in an air-conditioned laboratory, but goes into the reality, meets people, spends time with them. And that's why she's so blatant. And she is like a razor's edge, as like Somerset Maugham says, And she's so sensitive. And she brings out the truth so naively, yet so diligently. It's beautiful. Thanks a lot, Sarita. And that's why I got up. Because I was getting excited with your presentation. And we're going to have absolutely... Yes. Yeah. Suitadi, please. You cannot leave us. You will all die, And because I'll request Tonina to kindly come here because we are so moved by her presentation to kindly grace Suitadi. And as that goes on, we'll request a very supple, sweet young fellow from IIT Kharagpur who will take us to a different journey before we break for lunch, because today we have a very tight schedule with so many presentations. And he has worked on the relation between archaeology and mythology. He has worked between the relations between the tribal settlements and the modernity of coastal zone regulations. And he has worked between the relationship between the future advents of tourism as an industry and the surges of the downtrodden, the backward, so-called the Adibashis, the original Aryans of India, as Swamiji used to call them, the original Aryans of India, not coming from a distant land, but already a part of India. In which Mahabharata, in which Ramayana, in which Veda can you show me a line and you say that the Aryans have come from outside? This was the voice of Swamiji, along with Tilak, and then Sri Aurobindo took over from there. So that's going to come from Professor William Mohanty. A big hand to Professor Mohanty. And one of his recent papers was as a part of the extended nature, and it had a worldwide acclaim. So William, you're going to do the tough task just before lunch.
Very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Professor Joyce and Jayada, for nice introduction. And really it's a top time whenever you go to present before lunch or after lunch. So I'll definitely cut short my presentation. Myself, William Mohanty. Just few minutes I was back, Professor Rautrai talking about one of the subject on his research work. This was done unknowingly, but thank you, Professor Rautrai, making part of one of the greatest research you are doing at IIT Kharagpur. So I am going to talk about something different, in the sense that I am from background of geology and geophysics. We look at evolution of India in the point of how changing on the surface of the earth and how it's going to influence our daily life, how it's influenced in the past. That's what I'm going to talk about here. If you look at the river system, and it's very closely linked with our civilization. So civilization, what we are looking at now and the past, they are developed all along the bank of the rivers. If you talk about civilization, spirituality, every political situation, everything it has linked to the river system. So as a geophysics student, a researcher, I look at when the river system was flowing in that past and why it dried up, what is the cause behind it. And before Sandhi, we are doing on a geophysical, geological aspect. But like visionary from Professor Joyson and others gave us some path to look at how this flowing of the river can be linked with heritage or civilization. That's what I'm going to talk about here. We'll talk about majorly few civilization, then we'll go back to our own research work, what we are doing and what we got, and what is the benefit of doing this job. So the topic of my thing is Indian river system and implication on Indian civilization. So this is one of the figures showing that northwestern part of the India, how the early civilization started from there. The black dashed lines are Indus River and red lines are for the Saraswati River. The major civilization like Harappan and Mohenjo-daro, they started on the northwestern Indian part. So early civilization was across the tropical of Cancer. So if you look at the river system in India, so most of the river system, they are originated from the Himalaya, and few of them like from Krishna, Godavari, Narmada and Mahanadi river system, they are from the peninsular India. So this Himalayan river system, which started 50 to 60 million years back, that's because of the Himalaya started forming 65 million years back due to the collision of Indian with the Eurasian plate, and it's rising and generating the river system there. As I'm talking here, the Himalaya is rising, and that modified the course of the many of the river system in the Himalaya region. So most glaciers and the monsoon, they are the responsible for the river system in the Himalaya region. So next, when you talk about the ancient literature, every literature you will get some sort of some saying on the river, like we have the Saraswati river, there is a Rig Veda talk about, oh Saraswati, you are the best of mothers, the best of rivers and best of gods. Although we are of no repute, mother grants us distinction. So there are always, we have river has a great influence on our daily life. So these are some archaeological structures from these early civilization, which Dr. Ghosh has very exclusively talked about this. I'm not going to detail about that. Then we have this ancient civilization when it started from 40,000 BC to till 500 BC, how it's the Harappan civilization has started, and so this is one of the excavation from the Mohenjo-daro Harappa site. And if you look at the Indo-Saraswati river system, about 40,000 before caste, you have whole of the Rajasthan and all, it was a greenery, wetland, and it is a Saraswati river and its tributary was extensively drainage pattern were there. Then it started from the wet climate, it started the dry climate, and because of the climate changes, also geological influence like upliftment of Delhi Haridwar Ridge, they influence the flow of the river Saraswati and disappearance of the river Saraswati over there. Then this Indus river system was further shifted to the Ganges alluvium sites. So this one way, when you look at the civilization, it started with some, besides some river system, but ultimately when the river system dries up, extinct, they shift the civilization from one part to another part, further looking at the course of the river. So this, for the river system to dry up or extinct, we have some human dominated ecosystem is responsible for that. I am not going to in detail about that. So this is basically showing the settlement of the Indus and Saraswati river system, how it's shifted from the Indus Saraswati to relocation with the areas after the 1900 BC. So when you have the Indus Saraswati system, civilization was there, it was a huge amount of networking with the ocean. They are doing huge amount of business on the other countries over there. Then it shifted to this part. So we'll go to that, why you have Saraswati river dry up. There's a huge amount of discussion and many school of thought about the disappearance of the Saraswati river. Some few main reasons behind it: the change of the monsoon scenario. From wetland of the Rajasthan is completely changed to the dry Sahara desert, is equivalent to Syrian desert region. Then of course the geological tectonic implication of that, which showing that one of the such events showing satellite imagery, it clearly shows the mismatch along the Marakan-Bata divide, which divides the Indus river system to Ganga-Yamuna river system over there. So this is the sites showing on the Indus river system how the Harappan the red dot showing the all the important parts of the Harappan site. Then we have this Adivadri area where the main Buddhist site was their religious place on the past, and some of the archaeological excavation point of view there is showing over here. Then coming back to our research area, what we did in the Odisha coast. Basically, when you look at the past rivers, so why we really look for the past rivers? So it was there and it has already dried up. So one such, the main utilization of the past river is that when you look at along the past rivers, it will give you some of the beautiful monuments, heritage sites over there. Like on desert, Sahara desert, people have studied about the course of Saraswati river. Why they are studying that? In the desert we can get some freshwater pocket. And the Odisha coast, when you look at the Odisha coast, some river system over there, there's a huge amount of problem like saline water contamination. To get fresh water, if you can find out some of the paleo channels, those are the future source of freshwater content on that region. So we have seen this part, some of my collaborators here from IIT itself, Jayada is one of them, Professor Priyadarshi Patnaik, Professor Narayan Chand Naik, and Professor Arvind Rautrai. We all together in this project look at one such thing that if you map the heritage sites, all the heritage sites in this Puri Canuck region, and trace it and map it, you will see that one of the past rivers were flowing on that part of that coastal part. Or otherwise, if you scientifically prove or locate or find the path for the paleo rivers, you will find that all throughout the bank of the river, you will find some broken monuments, heritage sites, temples on that side. So this is two of the river. One of my research scholar worked extensively on this region. One is Chandravaga and another is Sardar river. Chandravaga river is believed to be very close to the Canuck. There is a huge amount of stories, myths and photographs available regarding the presence of Chandravaga near to the Canuck. But if you look at now at present, around 20 kilometers to Canuck, there is no water body, except that 3 kilometers away the sea is there. So talking about a river existing near to the Canuck is not there. But many stories, if you look at, this is very well documented stories are there which talk about the presence of Chandravaga near to that. Even the tail end of the Chandravaga, which Chandravaga Buddha, people talk about that still there near to the coast. And one of the Sardar river, which is in the Borodanda, those who have already visited Canuck, they might have seen one such river is there, which was bisecting the Borodanda, where the Rath Yatra used to be have. So in long back, we used to have 6 chariots during the Rath Yatra. 3 chariots used to have in one side of the Sardar river. Then the deities come through the boat to the other side. Then there's another 3 chariots are there. So that was a river bisecting the Borodanda. Then after certain time, it was filled up with the sand, and still people talk about Sarada Valley on that region. So though a huge amount of settlement has developed there, we try to trace out the Sarada river on the Borodanda. So what are the methodology available to do that? You have the stories and documents available regarding the presence of the past rivers. How you can scientifically prove it? So when you look at on the surface, so you may not be able to talk about the river there. But when you go up and look at the ground, you will see some patterns. It might be vegetation patterns. You find moisture content, the temperature variation over there, which will be captured by the satellite imagery. So when you analyze those, which gives us the low temperature, high moisture contents, and the pattern of vegetation pattern, all these things guide us to look at some of the paleo rivers are there. When you go to the ground and look at the cross-section things, we'll see that the lithology, ground below the lithology is different, and they are deposited at the valley type. And also there is some techniques available like ground penetration radar. You send the signal and retrieve the signal on some sensors. Then you will look at that, it will talk about the subsurface geology. So from the history, myth and documentation part, we try to look at in the satellite imagery, going to the ground truth geological field section. Then we try to look at geophysically subsurface, how we can look at the subsurface, and everything integrated together, we able to trace out the river path. I'll request Shubham to talk about how we got the Chandravaga and Sardar river. Shubham.
Good afternoon, everybody. as Professor Mohanty has told, that there are lots of stories regarding these two mythical rivers, that is Chandravagha in Konark and Sharoda river in Puri. I am not going in details about these stories. I am just saying the evidences what we have found in finding these two mythical rivers. Well, from the ancient, one of the ancient painting, this is the ancient, one of the ancient painting. It is the Canuck Temple here, and you can see that this red mark area, this is the water region, and that depicts that in the ancient time, Canuck Temple was built on the near to the some water body. That we are suspecting that this water body might be the mythical Chandravagha. Well, there are lots of rituals also. This regarding this river, still it is practiced in Orissa, that is Magha Saptami, Shambhadashami, Ratha Yatra, etc. Ancient temples, monuments, these are usually built along the banks of the rivers. And we also, in our study area also, we also find some temples, that is Gangeshwari temple, Chaurasiya Varahi temple, Nilmadhava temples, and that indicates that in the ancient time there was a river system, these Puri Konark regions. In the Puri also there are some temples like Alam Chandi temple, Bankimana Ramochandi temple, Mausima temple. These also indicates that the presence of the ancient river in the Puri region. Now going to the scientific evidence. This is the satellite imagery of the Konark region, this upper part, and you know that satellite imagery gives the synoptic view of the river. Okay, and this upper river, that is the sinusoidal river trend which is showing, that is the existing river, that is the Patharbua river, that is still existing. What we are saying, showing within the yellow rectangle, that river does not exist. But satellite imagery depicts the clear sinusoidal patch that indicates that once there was a river. Okay. The river is characterized by river, or better say paleo channel, that is a dried river. It is characterized by high vegetation, then high moisture content, then low temperature at that region. Now, due to these factors, this synoptical view is very much clearly visible here. Similarly, in the Puri region also, this yellow dotted line indicates the paleo channel. This is the Jagannath temple, Gundicha temple. In between them, the river was once flowed and bisecting this grand road, or that is the Borodondo road. Now we have made GPR survey, that is the ground penetrating radar survey. Now ground penetrating radar, that is it is a sophisticated instrument that sends the electromagnetic waves. Now we know that paleo channel, it is a dried river valley. With time these are filled up with loose sediments. Now naturally the property of the loose sediments and the property of the river bank are totally different. Due to this difference in properties, the electromagnetic waves are reflected back, and these are digitally recorded. As a result, we get a subsurface image of the lithology. You can see the two river banks. These are basically wet clays, and in between them lies the field of sediments, loose sediments. In both the cases, we have, in both Konark and in the Puri region, we have made GPS survey. And we also get the evidence of these subsurface river valleys. That indicates that in both Puri and Konark region, there were some ancient rivers. Now we have made some field validations. This is the Konark region. Very near to Konark temple, that is, there is a village called Tikorpara, There we are getting that is the connection of this past Chandrabhaga river with the Kadua river. Kadua river is still existing, and some swampy lands are also found very near to the temple in Kunar-Kakatpur road, along the Kunar-Kakatpur road, and these swampy lands are filled up with water hyacinth plants. Now that indicates that once there was a river, now it is dried up and leaving the remnants of small water bodies. Similarly, in the Puri region, this is along very near to Chakratirtha road and the Banki-Mohana road, we found a large water body, and these are the two small photographs of this large water body. You can see the river mouth, which is indicates that the river was connected. The river once flowed to this sea, Puri sea beach, and this is the water body, that part. Now this is the final reconstructed map after gathering all the evidences. We have found that this is the Konark region. The once Chandrabhaga flow along the coast, parallel to the coast, in the northeast southwest directions. Similarly, in the Puri region, we are, after gathering the evidence, we are getting the north-south trending river flow that bisecting the Borodondo road, which connects the Jagannath Temple and the Puri Gundicha Temple.
Thank you so much. I request Tanima to come again, and Grace, Professor Mohanty, and Shubhamay. Yeah. And I think we are seeing some real settlement transfers from this room to the space beyond this room. Yeah. And I think we cannot have a question answer session right now, and because we have a very tight day today. So let's give a big hand to these three. I think there are a lot of questions which are roaming in the airs, but we cannot have it right now. Instead, we proceed for lunch, and we try to convene here by 2:30. We are not extending the time.